It was the kind of birthday morning that looked perfect in photographs. The Connecticut spring was just waking up, the trees outside still shy of full green, but sunlight pressed in on the kitchen's spotless marble counters. I sat at the far end of the long farm table, cradling a mug of coffee that tasted faintly burnt, watching my younger sister Olivia dazzle under the chandelier's light. Mom and Dad hovered close, both beaming as Olivia peeled back the silver wrapping paper on a navy blue box. "Oh my God, it's gorgeous," she gasped, holding up a diamond pendant that caught every ray of light, sending small rainbows dancing across the wallpaper. Dad clapped her on the back. Mom leaned in for a photo, her arm tight around Olivia's shoulders. My phone vibrated once in my lap. "Happy birthday, Maddie. Love you. Bagels at our spot later." Ashley, always remembering, even from a city away. Nobody looked my way, not even when the housekeeper, Mrs. O'Leary, slid a plate of bagels in front of me. "Here you go, Miss Madison," she whispered, almost apologetic. I smiled in thanks, but the gesture felt oddly theatrical, as if even the bagels had been staged for someone else's Instagram. My mother let out a tiny sigh as I reached for the plain bagel, her gaze flicking between Olivia's glittering necklace and my chipped mug. Growing up, I'd long suspected that I was the afterthought in my family. Olivia was the one with the big laugh and the golden hair, the lead in every school play, the star of Dad's stories at parties. I was Maddie, the reliable one, never late, never loud, always steady. I used to wonder if maybe that was enough. A flash of memory surfaced, the steady, calloused hands of Grandpa Edward guiding mine as we ladled hot soup for strangers in a drafty Boston church basement. "A legacy isn't measured by what you keep, Maddie," he'd say, voice low so only I could hear. "It's what you give away that counts." He'd ruffle my hair, always with that secret little wink, and we'd head back into the brisk winter air, our hands smelling of bread and onions and hope. I missed him more acutely in moments like this, where every gesture in the Carter house seemed meant for show. "Olivia, let's get a photo by the window. The light is just perfect," Mom said, ushering Olivia over, the pendant already catching new fire in the morning sun. I tried not to flinch as Olivia waved me over. "Mads, come on, get in one." She looped her arm around my shoulders for a second, her perfume, floral, expensive, filling my nose. The photo snapped, and as soon as the flash faded, Olivia's attention was already elsewhere, phone out, fingers flying to upload her latest birthday surprise to her followers. My phone buzzed again. Ashley this time sent a meme about being the unproblematic sibling, followed by a hang-in-there emoji. I smiled despite myself. Even on the loneliest days, Ashley knew how to cut through the fog. Dad cleared his throat, glancing at his watch as the household staff quietly cleared away breakfast. "Let's not keep Douglas waiting," he said, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged hallway. I followed the family to the study, every step feeling heavier than the last. The study always smelled like leather and old books, dust motes swirling in the sunlight. The family lawyer, Douglas Miller, stood by the window, manila folder in hand, his suit a little too crisp for the room's softness. I'd never seen Mom and Dad look so stiff, Olivia so uncertain. Douglas smiled politely, but his eyes were darting, restless. "Shall we begin?" he asked. He opened the folder and spoke in careful, neutral tones. "After careful review and discussions with your parents, there will be some adjustments to the terms of the family trust and inheritance." I felt my stomach tighten. Olivia's face lit up. "Does that mean?" Mom squeezed her hand. "You'll have full access to the Carter estate, and the trust fund. Darling, she said, her voice warm and proud. It's what's best for the family. Dad nodded, his lips pressed in a line. Douglas shifted his weight. Madison, you'll receive a modest trust, but the majority will go to Olivia, given her active involvement in family matters. I opened my mouth, but no words came out at first. Grandpa, he wanted, I began, voice smaller than I intended. Dad cut me off, his tone dismissive. Madison, don't be childish. This is how it must be. Mom's gaze softened, but only a fraction. It's not about favorites, sweetheart. Olivia needs more support right now. I'm sure you understand. I stared at them, my parents, my sister, the lawyer who'd watched me grow up. The world spun. In a single sentence, the house I'd known as home seemed to evaporate beneath me. I was an afterthought, a footnote in my own family's story. Afterwards, I drifted up the sweeping staircase to my room, barely hearing the muted conversation and distant laughter trailing behind me. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, throwing pale patterns on the quilted bedspread. I moved like a ghost, taking in the trophies and framed photos on the shelves, Olivia's, mostly, but a few of mine from quieter victories. Something on my pillow caught my eye, a sealed envelope, heavy cream paper, my name written in Grandpa Edward's old-fashioned hand. For Madison, if you ever feel lost. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, heart pounding. The house suddenly felt colder, the walls pressing in. Downstairs, Olivia's laughter rose, bright, easy, echoing off the marble and polished wood. I stood at the window, clutching Grandpa's letter, watching a cardinal flutter onto the budding magnolia outside. I wondered what Grandpa had wanted to tell me, and if the words in that envelope might still matter in a world that seemed determined to forget I existed. For a long moment, I simply stood, lost in the quiet, caught between opening the letter or turning my back on the Carter house forever. And outside my window, the world went on, Olivia's birthday photos already filling up my feed, the estate gleaming for another day, the family legacy passing quietly out of my hands. I woke to the muffled thump of boxes against wood floors and the murmur of unfamiliar voices outside my bedroom door. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, but the chill in the air, the sharp scent of rain drifting in through a cracked window, and my father's voice, curt, precise, brought me fully awake. Be careful with that, he called to someone, his words slicing through the hall like a knife. I lay still, listening as the house I'd called home all my life rearranged itself without me. The sound of my dresser drawers being opened and emptied, the quiet apologies of Mrs. O'Leary as she packed my childhood into cardboard. I dressed quickly, old jeans and a sweater, my hands shaking as I tied my hair back. It felt important to look composed, even if the world I knew was splintering apart. When I opened my door, Patricia stood waiting, her arms folded, eyes unreadable. There was a hint of regret in the tight line of her mouth, but she said nothing as I stepped into the hall and saw two staffers wheeling my boxes away. No one met my gaze. Even Olivia, leaning against the wall scrolling through her phone, looked up only briefly. I hope you'll understand, Mads, she said, voice brittle. It's not personal. Things just got complicated. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her gaze darting to Patricia for backup. I waited for something real, a touch, a whispered apology, but Olivia only shrugged and returned to her notifications. At the top of the stairs, Richard Sr. waited with Douglas Miller at his side. Dad was perfectly calm, phone in one hand, as if he'd been preparing for this all his life. Madison, he said, a car will be here in an hour. I've arranged for your things to be sent to the address on your license. This is what's best for everyone. You need a fresh start. He handed me his phone, open to a ride-hailing app, call the car when you're ready. The words landed cold and heavy. I stood there, suitcase in hand, the click of my own shoes on marble echoing louder than anything else. The staff cleared a path to the door, faces averted. I noticed the butler, Mr. Peterson, watching from the corner. His mouth opened as if to say something, but Patricia's sharp glance silenced him. Rain spattered the wide stone steps outside, gathering in little rivers along the drive. I paused for a moment, my reflection blurred in the glass of the front door, then stepped out under the gray sky. The world smelled of earth and new grass, the kind of rain that lingers for days. I pulled my suitcase after me, its tiny wheels catching on the cracks. Somewhere, a neighbor's curtains twitched. Halfway down the walk, the handle of my suitcase snapped. Clothes tumbled onto the wet pavement, t-shirts, a faded sweater, a framed photo of Grandpa and me at the beach. I scrambled to gather everything, rain soaking my hair, tears stinging at the corners of my eyes. For a moment, I thought the staff would help, but they stood motionless in the doorway, unsure whether to cross that invisible line. The Uber driver arrived, a kind-faced woman in a Red Sox cap. "Tough morning," she said, voice soft as she helped me shove the last of my things into the trunk. I nodded, unable to answer. The house behind me looked as serene and proud as ever, the windows gleaming, the life inside moving on without me. We pulled away, and I watched as Olivia snapped a selfie under the porch with Patricia, both of them smiling for the camera. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a new social media alert, Olivia's story, "Family comes first," captioned with a line of champagne glasses and hearts. For a moment, I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. I sank back in the car, hands shaking, suitcase at my feet. As the raindrops smeared the city into gray streaks, I remembered Grandpa's voice. "When they try to erase you, leave them something to remember." My thoughts turned to the envelope I'd clutched all morning. Carefully, I opened it for the first time. Inside, Grandpa's handwriting sprawled across thick paper. "Madison, if you're reading this, it means you've reached the kind of crossroads that no map can help you navigate. You always had a sailor's heart, Maddie. When the wind turns, don't curse it. Adjust your sails." Enclosed is the key to my story, and perhaps to yours. All my love, Grandpa. A small brass key slipped out and landed in my palm. It was heavier than it looked, slightly tarnished, with a tiny anchor etched on its base. I ran my thumb over its smooth curve, suddenly certain that Grandpa had known this moment would come. The ride to Boston felt endless and numb. I texted Ashley, a clumsy string of words, mostly "I'm coming" and "Is it okay?" Her reply was instant, full of hearts and exclamation marks, of course. "I've got the couch ready and cocoa on the stove. Don't even think about apologizing." For the first time all day, I felt the edge of a smile tug at my lips. Ashley's apartment was everything the Carter estate wasn't. Cluttered, alive, filled with the smell of cinnamon and laundry. She greeted me at the door with open arms and a knit blanket, ushering me inside. "Leave your shoes, bring your heartache," she said, trying to keep it light. She'd ordered pizza, 2 kinds, because she never could remember if I still liked mushrooms, and a tub of mint ice cream sat melting on the counter. I sank onto the couch, finally safe, the city lights flickering outside the window. For a while, Ashley sat beside me, neither of us saying much. She put on old Motown songs, humming along out of tune. Eventually, the shock gave way, and I let myself cry, big, heaving sobs that shook my whole frame. Ashley just handed me tissues, never hurrying me, never filling the silence with platitudes. By the time I could breathe again, the apartment felt warmer. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, streetlights painting soft golden lines across the floor. I stared at the brass key, rolling it between my fingers. I wiped my eyes, letting the quiet settle. I won't let them write me out of my own story, I whispered, more to myself than to Ashley. She nodded, squeezing my hand. As the night wore on, the weight of the day shifted. I found myself wondering, not about what I'd lost, but about what Grandpa had left for me. The key pressed into my palm, heavy with possibility. Somewhere a new story waited, if only I was brave enough to find the door it opened. When you have nothing left but an old letter and a mysterious key, you follow the only trail you have. That's what I told myself the next morning as I sat at Ashley's tiny kitchen table, watching raindrops trace slow lines down the window. The brass key lay in front of me, glinting in the gray light. My world felt upended, yet some stubborn thread in me refused to let go of hope. Ashley bustled around the apartment, humming to herself as she poured coffee. "Okay, detective," she said, sliding a mug my way. "So what's the plan?" Her optimism was the kind you could lean on a friend's version of a life raft. I pulled Grandpa's letter from my bag and read it again, tracing the number written below his name, Frank Donovan. He was Grandpa's friend, maybe even his confidant, I said, dialing with trembling fingers. The phone rang just once before an older voice answered. "Donovan here." "Mr. Donovan, my name is Madison Carter." "My grandfather, Edward Carter, left me your number. He said you could help." There was a brief silence. "Edward always did have a knack for the dramatic," Frank replied, voice warm but cautious. "You sound just like him, stronger than you think. I can meet you, but be careful. Your family, they're not as quiet as you'd hope." Ashley insisted on coming with me. "You're not wandering Boston alone with a mystery key and a fresh heartbreak," she said, pulling a raincoat over her pajamas. As we made our way through damp city streets, I glanced at the notifications on my phone. Olivia's latest post, "Family means never having to say you're sorry." Gemstone sparkles #blessed. The world, it seemed, kept spinning on someone else's axis. Frank met us at a small coffee shop tucked away from the main square. He wore a battered old trench coat and ordered tea with too much honey. He slid an envelope across the table. "Your grandfather prepared all this," he said. "He wanted you to have it if things ever went south." Inside were bank documents and a safety deposit box number, a branch address just a few blocks away. Ashley squeezed my hand. "Let's do this," she whispered. The bank was quiet, its marble floors echoing with the hush of late morning. I handed the brass key and my ID to a polite clerk, who returned a moment later with a narrow box. My heart hammered as I opened it. Inside was a small pile, 3 USB drives, several sealed letters, and a thick stack of financial statements, some recent, some dating back years. Grandpa's handwriting was everywhere, looping and steady. One letter was addressed simply to me. "Maddie, you always saw the real weather, not just what the forecast predicted. Trust your instincts, even when everyone else calls for calm seas. The world will try to convince you that you are powerless. Prove them wrong. All my love, Grandpa." Tears threatened, but there wasn't time to fall apart. Ashley wrapped an arm around my shoulders, guiding me out into the drizzle. She flagged down a rideshare and, as we sped through city traffic, snapped photos of the documents to send to her tech-savvy cousin for backup. "Let's have David take a look," she said, already texting. David Reynolds, a friend of Ashley's from college and a sharp young attorney, met us in Ashley's living room that afternoon. He clicked through the files on my laptop, brow furrowing. "Your grandfather was careful," he said. "He set up fail-safes, trusts, backups, but your parents are moving fast. They've already petitioned to freeze all assets. If you want to challenge this, we need to move faster." I nodded, mind whirling. Grandpa's planning, his old stories about reading the weather now sounded less like metaphors and more like warnings. "It's not just about the money," I said quietly. "It's about the family name. Everything is at stake." David looked at me over his glasses. "Your parents have resources, but you have something they don't: documentation and people willing to talk. But you need to be careful. They're on the offensive." Later, while Ashley ran out for takeout coffee and the world outside blurred into a steady gray, I paged through the statements and letters. One envelope contained a list of contacts, including Samuel Pierce, Grandpa's former financial. When your family tries to erase you from existence, sometimes the only thing left to do is flip the script. That morning, I stood in front of the Boston courthouse with a scarf Ashley had wrapped around my neck like armor. My fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from everything this moment meant. A week ago, I was just the daughter they brushed aside. Today, I was the one dragging the Carter name into court. David greeted me with his usual quiet confidence. "The filing's in. We're requesting a freeze on all Carter family accounts until the fraud investigation is complete," he said, holding a thick folder of statements, emails, and Grandpa's signed directives. Behind his glasses, his eyes were sharp. "This isn't just bold, it's your best move. Grandpa once told me while tightening a line on the sailboat, sometimes the best defense is a bold move, especially when everyone expects you to fold." I hadn't understood that then. I did now. The motion was filed mid-morning. By afternoon, Carter assets frozen amidst family feud trended across Twitter. Olivia posted a teary-eyed video claiming she was the victim of legal harassment. Patricia released a PR statement asking for privacy during this difficult time, while Richard Sr. said nothing at all, just canceled appearances and closed ranks. My inbox flooded. Some strangers called me brave. Others accused me of being a greedy disappointment. I silenced most notifications, but a text from Ashley made me smile. "Still got leftover mac and cheese if you need to hide out." That night, we met Gerald Peterson at a hole-in-the-wall diner David suggested. Low light, greasy fries, and the kind of place no one with a trust fund would step foot in. Gerald looked tired, like someone carrying the weight of knowing too much for too long. He slid a folded document across the table. "I worked for Edward Carter for 30 years, he said. "He was sharp until the very end. I was there when he made the changes to the will. I'm willing to swear that in court." I stared at him. "Why now?" He sighed. "Because your grandfather trusted you. And I've seen what happens to truth when people stay quiet too long." We shook hands. I almost cried. Later that week, Frank Donovan arranged a meeting with a reporter named Claire. She wasn't flashy, just careful, measured, and quietly fierce. "I'm not here to sensationalize," she said, notebook poised. "But I believe stories like yours deserve to be heard. The real ones." While we spoke, Ashley sat beside me, one hand around her mug, the other gently nudging my knee whenever I started to hesitate. She believed in me more than I did some days. Then came the hearing. I walked into that courtroom expecting cold marble and even colder faces. I got both. Olivia wore pearls and practiced pity. My mother clutched tissues she never used. My father glared like I was a stranger who had ruined his brunch. Douglas Miller, their lawyer, called the whole thing a misguided emotional overreaction. David countered with documentation, testimony drafts, and digital records. When the judge ruled in our favor, freezing all Carter family accounts until the investigation's completion, there was a moment of stunned silence. My parents looked truly afraid. Not angry, not insulted, just scared. For the first time, I felt the weight of power shift. But victory didn't taste like champagne. Outside the courthouse, the sky was soft with evening light. Reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. Ashley linked arms with me and pulled me toward a side exit. That night, back in her apartment, an encrypted email arrived. The subject line read only, "For the day of the storm." I opened it slowly. There, waiting on the screen, was a folder of hidden files and one video message. From Grandpa. And suddenly I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the turning tide. There's a moment in every storm when you stop surviving and start steering. Today was that day. David and I sat in the quiet of my borrowed apartment, the curtains half drawn, the laptop between us glowing with a single thumbnail. For Madison. Final proof. The encrypted email had taken hours to crack. David hovered beside me, still in his suit, while Ashley handed me a blanket I didn't realize I needed. My finger hovered over the play button. Then I clicked. Grandpa filled the screen. He sat at his desk, the same one where he taught me how to read stock reports with lemonade sticky fingers. He looked tired but focused, his voice even and deliberate. "If you're watching this, Maddie," he began, "they tried to erase you. But you're not invisible. You never were. I didn't raise you to fold, I raised you to lead." He outlined everything. How he'd witnessed the growing entitlement of my parents. How Olivia's gambling spiraled into debts that were quietly paid off with family funds. How Douglas Miller helped reorganize the estate behind closed doors. And most importantly, he named me, clearly and without hesitation, as his intended heir. "I've signed the will," he said, holding it up. Linda witnessed it. Samuel reviewed it. And Gerald knows where the copies are stored. I did all this so that when they lie, and they will, there's proof. Ashley whispered, "My God," and David sat back in silence. It wasn't just a letter. It was a lifeline. By morning, Linda Stevens, Grandpa's former secretary, had agreed to testify. Edward was as lucid as ever that day, she said in court, her voice trembling but firm. He even joked that I should keep the pen in case it became famous. The courtroom felt like a furnace. Patricia sat stiff, hands knotted in her lap, while Richard's face was a blank wall. Olivia, in a high-necked blouse and too much perfume, wouldn't look at me. But I saw her phone screen flash under the table, text after text, like a dam about to burst. Outside, the media swirled. Claire's article dropped just before the second hearing. Forgotten heiress? The woman the Carter family tried to erase. Comments poured in. For the first time, the tide turned. People weren't just curious, they were angry. At them. With me. That night, I sat by the window while Ashley microwaved leftover soup. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head, "I left you more than memories. I left you proof." In court the next day, the air was electric. David presented the video. Linda confirmed the timeline. Gerald corroborated everything with dates, logs, and his own testimony. Frank nodded from the backbench, arms crossed, face unreadable. Then Olivia stood. Her attorney hesitated, but she pushed forward. Voice shaking, she admitted the debts. The lies. The manipulation. "I'm not proud," she said. I wanted to be seen. And I thought if I could just hold on to what I thought was mine, I'd matter more. She didn't cry until she sat down. Patricia leaned toward me during recess. "Madison," she said, "we can fix this. You're still our daughter. You don't have to finish this fight." I turned to her, meeting the eyes of the woman who had watched me be cast out in the rain. "No," I said, "steady now. You lost that right the day you watched them carry my boxes out." When the judge returned, the room held its breath. He ruled in our favor. The will Grandpa signed was valid. The attempted override by my parents was deemed willful misrepresentation. Restitution was ordered. The court referred Douglas Miller to the Bar Association for professional misconduct. And just like that, the Carter storm broke open. News cameras caught the moment we exited. Banners blinked across screens. "Madison Carter wins. Justice or family feud?" I ignored them all. Ashley gripped my hand. David exhaled for the first time in hours. I shook Frank's hand and hugged Gerald. Then, as the room emptied, Olivia slipped me a folded piece of paper. Just 5 words written in shaky script. "I'm sorry. You were right." And below that, in smaller handwriting, "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to know." I stood alone for a moment longer, paper in hand, heart heavy, not with bitterness, but with the weight of what we carry when we choose to remember instead of forget.